expired, and I give the call to member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As the member for Goldstein, it's a great pleasure to be able to get up and endorse the words and the vision of the member for Fairfax in supporting this motion. But to start by recalling my incredible disappointment in the previous speaker and his speech. Now, Deputy Speaker, I fully understand that Labor MPs would struggle with understanding the common benefit to the entire Australian community from freer and more open markets and trade agreements. Because the last time they were in government, they were led by a trade minister, I think personally the most failed trade minister in Australian history, Craig Emerson, who failed throughout his entire tenure when he spent all his time waxing lyrical and distancing himself off to Geneva under multilateralism, to lack an understanding of the benefits of what can be done in compounding the benefits of bilateral agreements towards multilateral agreements. And we've heard this all the time. All the time. It was insufferable as somebody as passionate about free and open markets as me to see the failure of the governments that they led and what they delivered for the Australian community versus the action and outcomes of the coalition government. And that is what has transcended since there was a change of government from Labor to the coalition. And not just that, the ambition that we now share for what we can do for our country. Because yes, we've had 27 years of uninterrupted economic growth. In last year, we had $48.3 billion in surplus and 5.7 in May alone, a record. But it's not just the dollars and cents that bring about the benefits of freer trade. Of course, there is the export of goods, but increasingly the opportunity that we can secure for our free trade agreements is greater market access for investment and for our service exports. And of course, the vast majority, and this is a trend since the beginning of federation, the vast majority of Australians are employed in service-based industries. And to realise the potential of that human capital and what we can take to the world to build their skills and opportunity, but also, of course, whether it's engineers to build new buildings or architects or legal services and support, and of course financial services, a sector that has been nothing but in the crosshairs of the Labor opposition at the last election. We're backing these industries to grow and to be able to achieve market access. They're not just building the economic capacity of the country, they're building the skills, the knowledge and the experience and the exposure for us to be globally competitive in our goods and services. Least of all because one of the great unsung benefits of freer trade is, of course, the potential for the transfer of technology. And Australia has largely been a technology taker, not always, but often. And so our capacity to integrate greater technology or newer technology into our businesses and our systems to make us more competitive is a critical part of the national conversation. And that's why this government is so aggressive in continuing to pursue FTAs and bilateral agreements, and now increasingly to work through regional agreements, not just through the TPP, but across many of our neighbour partners. And of course, the Prime Minister has got a big focus on what we can do in reforming the World Trade Organization so it meets the ambition and the capacity for the 21st century. Of course, the WTO was set up as a successor to the GATT on the basis of much of the politics of the 1990s. And we know through the leadership of countries like Australia since then that the discussion has shifted and that the rules need to shift in part with it to make it relevant for our times. We shouldn't discount its potential and its contribution, particularly against the backdrop of what it can be for dispute resolution. But Australia can lead the world. And to be fair to our Labor members sitting on the other side, they once did that in their pursuit throughout the late 80s and 90s, as I mentioned, in the early 90s, as I mentioned in my valedictory address to the late, great Bob Hawke. And I call upon them to relive that spirit and to see the potential of what we can do through FTAs, multilateral instruments, and to build the economy Australia needs for the future. So now is not a time for remorse or for simply raising out concerns about why things cannot be done and looking at why we can. We've secured trade deals with so many of our partners and trading partners in the region. We're now looking further afield, particularly across the Pacific into the South Americans. And there is so much further to go.
Time has expired. I thank the